Hi, my name is Matthew Harris.
My name is Michael Myers.
My name is Noah Meshwork.
I'm Steven Krause, and we're the Naughty Boys.
Before we even began thinking about what our canoe would look like, we decided that we would need to test out different types of concrete to determine what it would be made out of. We began testing concrete with 3 different types of aggregate, one with foam balls, one with aluminum foil, and one with sand. After observing the cured concrete samples, we decided that our first canoe would be made using an aggregate of foam balls and aluminum foil in order to decrease its density. Then, we decided to cut a mold in the shape of a canoe out of foam yoga blocks and pour our cement mixture into it. We placed 2 cups duct taped together into the wet concrete in order to create an interior for the canoe, and let it cure for a week. The testing of the first canoe was a failure. It sank like a rock due to its immense weight and had many holes in it. We discussed why this canoe was a failure and reached the following conclusions. For one, the 2 cups that we duct taped together increased the overall thickness of the walls. Subsequently, this increased the overall weight of the canoe and decreased buoyancy. The second conclusion we reached was that using foam balls and aluminum aggregate caused small holes to form inside of the concrete. Our solution to decreasing the overall weight of the canoe was to custom build an object that fit into the mold so that the walls of the canoe would be thinner. In order to eliminate the small holes that cause water to leak into the canoe, we decided to use sand as an aggregate. We had identified in our initial testing that it produced a very dense, smooth concrete. We then produced another canoe using these changes. Upon testing the second canoe, we found that water no longer leaked into it, yet the canoe was still far too heavy to float and sank. At this point in the design process, we were faced with a large issue. We could not figure out a method to make the walls thin enough to produce a lightweight canoe that could float. After we discussed the issue, we developed a potential solution. We could fill our mold entirely with concrete and allow it to partially cure. In this partially cured state, we could scoop out concrete in layers from the mold to make very thin walls. Then we would allow the canoe to fully cure.
We attempted this method and finally had success. Our third canoe we produced using this method could float. One issue we identified with it, however, was that it was partially lopsided, and this made it unbalanced in the water. Due to this lopsidedness, the canoe would not float as well. We solved this issue by taking a metal file and removing small layers off the canoe until it was well balanced. Even though we had a canoe that floated, we wanted to try and improve on it. We used the same scooping method that we had on the previous canoe, but this time we made the walls even thinner than we had previous. When it came time to test this canoe, we placed it in the water and it floated better than the previous model. As we went to pick it up, however, the canoe broke down the center. We realized that making the wall so thin has sacrificed the canoe's strength, which must also be taken in as an important factor. With this in mind, we decided that the previous generation of canoe, the third canoe, would be used at the Fed competition. As for our performance during Fed, we did relatively well. The canoe was able to hold 290 grams worth of marbles, and while that wasn't enough to gain any recognition from the judges, 290 grams was pretty successful considering our first prototype canoes didn't float at all. And because of that, we see our performance during Fed as a success, because we believe that our final rendition was near the maximum performance we'd see from the mold that we had.
During the design cycle, we focused on decreasing the overall mass of the canoe while maintaining everything else constant. By going through a trial and error process to determine the best way to decrease the thickness of the walls, we developed our final product. However, our final product could have been improved if we altered some of the facts we kept constant throughout the design. The cross-section of the canoe was in the shape of a U. Although it was structurally sound, it could have displaced more water if it began to come together towards the top. This would increase the overall surface area of the canoe, which would increase the overall buoyancy, while keeping it within the size restrictions required. Using sand as an aggregate, although wasn't inherently bad, increased the overall mass of the canoe. The sand could have had a better fit substitute, such as charcoal dust or volcanic ash, which wouldn't increase the overall mass as much. Although we had the money in our budget, obtaining those materials proved difficult, and that's why we used sand instead. The cement we used throughout the design process was a generalized cement type, most likely being Portland cement. If we had the resources, analyzing other commercial-based concrete brands would have proved useful, as we could determine which is the strongest and lightest cement.
Advice to freshmen: start early. This includes both planning and building your canoe. The more time you spend building, the more time you have for testing, and the better your final canoe will be. Testing is better than planning, more often than not. You may have the perfect plan, but it will likely not work. It is best to have several trials to iron out the kinks in your design. Save room in the budget for pizza, or in case something goes wrong. Either you'll need a new type of concrete or you'll run out, or your mold does not fit. Do not plan to use all $40 on initial supplies. Safe is better than sorry. If it is crunch time and your last canoe broke, make the canoe that you know will at least float. Don't attempt to make a very thin canoe that is likely to break if you do not have a backup. This leads us to our freshman 15 tips. Focus on the project. Integrate each other's skills. Finish the project early. Telepathy. Your teammates likely do not have this ability. Communicate with each other. Energize your team. Nobody likes a boring project. Express your ideas and thoughts to your teammates. Negotiate in the guaranteed instance where people do not agree with each other. And this leads us to our works cited page.